The first time Lily Chen was taken from her mother, she was 8 years old. She remembers it like a bad dream that never quite fades. The social workers came on a Tuesday afternoon, just after she got home from school. Her backpack was still on her shoulders when they knocked on the door. Her mother, Mai, had been sitting in the dark again. The curtains were closed. The dishes were piled high in the sink. There was no food in the refrigerator except for a bottle of ketchup and some old leftover rice that had gone hard around the edges. Lily didn't understand what was happening at first. The social workers spoke in soft voices, the kind adults use when they're trying to hide something bad. They asked her to pack a bag. They told her she was going to stay with a nice family for a little while, just until her mom felt better. She looked back at her mother as they led her out the door. Mai was crying, but she didn't move from the couch. She just sat there with her hands in her lap, tears running down her face, whispering something Lily couldn't hear. That was 3 years ago. Lily is 11 now, and she's lived in 4 different foster homes since that day. The thing about foster care that nobody tells you is how tired you get. Not just regular tired, but tired in your bones. Tired of packing your things into garbage bags because you don't have a real suitcase. Tired of learning new house rules and trying to remember which bedroom is yours. Tired of starting over at new schools where kids look at you funny because you showed up in the middle of the year with clothes that don't quite fit. Lily learned early on that it was better not to get too comfortable. The first family she stayed with, the Huangs, were nice enough. They had 2 kids of their own and a dog named Biscuit. Missus. Huang made good food and always asked Lily about her day. For a few months, Lily started to think, maybe this could work. Maybe this could be her new normal. But then Mr. Huang got a job in another state, and just like that, Lily was moved again. The second home was harder. The Patels had 4 other foster kids, and the house was always loud and chaotic. There wasn't enough space. Lily shared a room with 2 other girls who fought constantly. She learned to make herself small, to stay out of the way, to not ask for too much. The third home only lasted 6 weeks. The foster mother, a woman named Gloria, said Lily was too quiet, too sad. She made the other children in the house uncomfortable, Gloria said. It wasn't a good fit. Lily didn't argue. She just packed her bag again and waited by the door for the social worker to come pick her up. Now she lives with the Reyes family. They're okay. Mr. and Mrs. Reyes run a tight ship. There are rules for everything. Bedtime at 9. No snacks after dinner. Homework done before any screen time. They're not mean, exactly, but they're not warm either. They treat fostering like a job, which maybe it is for them. Lily has her own room here, which is nice. It's small, barely bigger than a closet, but it's hers. She keeps her things neat and organized. A few books from the library, some clothes folded in the dresser. A photo of her mother that she hides under her pillow because she doesn't want anyone to ask questions about it. And then there's the recorder. It's a simple wooden instrument, the kind you might find in a music classroom at an elementary school. The finish is worn off in places from years of handling. There's a small crack near the mouthpiece that Lily has fixed with tape more than once. It's not valuable. Most people would look at it and see junk. But to Lily, it's everything. Her mother gave it to her on her 5th birthday, back when things were still good. Back when her father was alive and her mother smiled, and their little apartment felt like the safest place in the world. Mai couldn't afford much of a gift that year, but she found the recorder at a thrift store and cleaned it up. She wrapped it in newspaper because they didn't have wrapping paper, and she drew little stars on it with a marker. Lily loved it immediately. She didn't know how to play it at first, just made squeaky sounds that made her parents laugh. But her mother sat with her that night and taught her a song. It was a lullaby, something Mai's own mother had sung to her back in China when she was small. The melody was simple. Just a few notes, really. But Mai hummed along as Lily played. And when Lily finally got it right, her mother clapped her hands and said she was a natural musician. After that, the lullaby became their thing. Every night before bed, Lily would play it on her recorder, and Mai would sing the words softly in Mandarin. Sometimes her father would stand in the doorway and listen, smiling at both of them, with so much love in his eyes. Then her father died. It happened at work. He was a construction worker, and there was an accident at the site. Lily was 6 years old. She didn't fully understand death. Not really. She just knew that her daddy went to work one morning and never came home. Her mother broke after that. Not all at once, but slowly, like a crack spreading through glass. At first, she just cried a lot. Then she stopped eating. Then she stopped getting out of bed. Then she stopped talking altogether. Lily tried to help. She was only 6, but she did her best. She made sandwiches for herself when there was bread. She tried to clean up around the apartment. She played her recorder every night, hoping the lullaby would make her mother smile again. It didn't work. The doctors said Mai had something called severe depression. They gave her medicine, but she didn't always take it. They suggested therapy, but she couldn't afford it. She lost her job because she couldn't get out of bed. They fell behind on rent. The apartment got dirtier and dirtier. Looking back, Lily understands now that her mother was drowning. Mai had lost her husband, her partner, the person she'd built her whole life around, and she was so deep in her grief that she couldn't see anything else, not even her own daughter who needed her. But understanding doesn't make it hurt less. The day the social workers came, Lily had been trying to take care of things on her own for weeks. She would wake up early and get herself ready for school. She would walk to the bus stop alone. She would come home and do her homework at the kitchen table while her mother slept in the bedroom. She thought if she was good enough, quiet enough, helpful enough, nobody would notice. Nobody would take her away. She was wrong. Now, 3 years later, Lily still plays that lullaby every night. She waits until the house is quiet, until Mr. and Mrs. Reyes have gone to bed, until she can hear the other foster kid down the hall stop moving around. Then she pulls out her recorder and plays so softly that the sound barely leaves her room. The melody hasn't changed. It's the same simple tune her mother taught her when she was 5. But it means something different now. It's not just a lullaby anymore. It's a promise. A promise that Lily hasn't forgotten where she came from. A promise that she's still waiting. A promise that no matter how many foster homes they put her in, no matter how many times she has to pack her bag and start over, she will never stop believing that one day her mother will come back for her. Some of the foster parents over the years have told her to stop playing. They say the sound is too sad. They say it makes the other children uncomfortable. One family even threatened to take the recorder away. Lily hid it in her pillowcase after that. She would rather lose almost anything else than lose that instrument. Because as long as she has the recorder, she has proof. Proof that she wasn't always a foster kid. Proof that she once had a mother who loved her. Proof that somewhere out there, even if it's been 3 long years, that mother is still alive. And maybe, just maybe, getting better. Mai Chen woke up at 4 in the morning on the day that would change everything. She didn't need an alarm. She hadn't been able to sleep anyway. For 3 years, she had been fighting to get her daughter back. 3 years of doctor's appointments, and therapy sessions, and medication adjustments. 3 years of proving to the state that she was stable enough, healthy enough, responsible enough to be a mother again. Today was the day she would find out if any of it had been enough. She got out of bed and turned on the light in her small apartment. It was a 1-bedroom place on the 3rd floor of an old building. The carpet was worn, and the radiator made strange noises at night. But it was clean. It was hers. And in the corner, she had set up a fold-out couch with new sheets and a stuffed panda she'd bought at a second-hand store. That was supposed to be Lily's spot. If everything went well today, Mai walked to the bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked older than her 34 years. There were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. Her hair, which she used to wear long and loose, was now cut short and practical. She didn't look like the same woman she'd been when her husband was alive. But she didn't look like the woman who had lost herself either. That was something. She thought about the person she'd been 3 years ago, lying in bed for days at a time, unable to move, unable to eat, unable to care for the little girl who needed her. The shame of that memory still burned in her chest. She would carry it forever, she knew. No amount of therapy could erase what she had put her daughter through, but the therapist had taught her something important. She said that shame was only useful if it motivated you to do better. And Mai had done better. She had climbed out of that darkness, one painful step at a time, and she had rebuilt her life from nothing. It hadn't been easy. Nothing about it had been easy. After Lily was taken, Mai spent 2 months in a psychiatric facility. She didn't have a choice. The state required it. She was so deep in her depression that she couldn't function, couldn't even answer basic questions about her own life. The doctors put her on new medication and monitored her around the clock. Those were the darkest weeks of her life. She missed Lily's 9th birthday while she was in that facility. She missed the start of the school year. She missed everything. But something shifted during that time. Maybe it was the medication finally working. Maybe it was hitting rock bottom and realizing she had nowhere to go but up. Or maybe it was the moment when her therapist, a gentle woman named Dr. Fong, asked her a simple question. "What do you want to live for, Mai?" The answer came without thinking. "My daughter. I want to live for my daughter." After that, Mai started to fight. Not just to survive, but to actually get better. She took her medication every single day, even when the side effects made her feel foggy and slow. She went to every therapy session, even when she didn't want to talk. She started exercising, just walking around the block at first, then longer and longer distances. When she was released from the facility, she had nothing. No job, no apartment, no money. Her husband's family had cut ties with her after the accident, and her own parents were back in China with no way to help. She was completely alone. She stayed at a shelter for 3 months while she got back on her feet. It was humiliating. She slept in a room with 20 other women and had to line up for meals. But she didn't complain. She kept her head down and focused on her goal. The social worker told her that if she wanted any chance of getting Lily back, she needed to demonstrate stability. That meant having a job. That meant having a home. That meant showing up to every single court-mandated requirement without fail. Mai did all of it. She got a job as a janitor at the county hospital. It was hard work. She cleaned floors and bathrooms and waiting rooms, often working night shifts that left her exhausted. But she showed up every single day. She never called in sick. She never complained. After 6 months, her supervisor told her she was one of the most reliable workers they'd ever had. She saved every penny she could. She ate cheap food and walked to work to save on bus fare. She didn't buy new clothes or go out with coworkers. Every dollar went into a savings account, building toward the day when she could rent her own place. It took 18 months, but she did it. She found the little one-bedroom apartment and signed the lease with shaking hands. It wasn't much, but it was hers. A real home. A place where Lily could come back to. The hardest part, though, wasn't the job or the apartment. The hardest part was the waiting. Mai was allowed supervised visits with Lily every other week. Just 2 hours at a time. In a room at the social services office, with a caseworker watching their every move. She couldn't hug her daughter without someone writing it down in a report. She couldn't have a private conversation without it being documented. Those visits were torture and treasure at the same time. Torture because they were so short, so controlled, so nothing like the real relationship they used to have. Treasure because at least she got to see her daughter. At least she got to hear her voice. Lily was different now. That was the thing that broke Mai's heart the most. The bubbly, chattering little girl she remembered had become quiet and guarded. Lily didn't talk much during their visits. She would sit with her hands in her lap and give short answers to Mai's questions. "How's school?" "Fine." "Are you eating okay?" "Yes." "Do you like your foster family?" They're okay. Mai understood. Her daughter had been hurt. She had learned not to trust, not to get too attached. That was Mai's fault. She had done that to her own child. But every visit, without fail, Lily would bring her recorder. And at some point during their 2 hours together, she would pull it out and play the lullaby. The same lullaby Mai had taught her years ago. The first time it happened, Mai burst into tears. She couldn't help it. The melody hit her like a punch to the chest, bringing back every memory of their old life. Lily sitting in her lap while she hummed along. Her husband standing in the doorway, smiling. The three of them, a family, whole and happy. After that, the lullaby became their ritual. Their way of connecting when words weren't enough. Lily would play, and Mai would listen. And for those few minutes, the room with the caseworker and the fluorescent lights would fade away. It was just the two of them, mother and daughter, holding on to each other through music. Now, standing in her bathroom mirror, Mai whispered a prayer. She wasn't particularly religious, but she prayed anyway. Please let today be the day. Please let me bring my daughter home. She put on her best clothes, a simple black dress and a cardigan. She couldn't afford anything fancy, but she had ironed everything twice. She wanted to look responsible, put together, like a mother who had her life in order. The courthouse was a 40-minute bus ride away. Mai left early because she couldn't stand being in the apartment alone with her thoughts. She sat on the bus and watched the city roll by through the window, her stomach churning with nerves. The lawyer she'd been assigned was a young public defender named Kevin Park. He was kind but clearly overworked. He had dozens of cases just like hers, and Mai could tell he hadn't had much time to prepare. But he believed in her. He told her so the last time they met. "You've done everything right, Mrs. Chen. I really think you have a good chance, but a good chance wasn't a guarantee." Mai knew that. The foster care system was complicated. The judge could decide that Lily was better off where she was. The judge could decide that Mai's history was too risky. The judge could decide all sorts of things. And there was nothing Mai could do except sit there and hope. She arrived at the courthouse an hour early and sat on a bench outside the courtroom. Her hands were shaking so badly that she had to clasp them together to keep them still. Other people walked by. Lawyers and families and court employees. But Mai barely saw them. She was lost in her own head, running through every possible outcome. What if the judge said no? What would she do? Would she keep fighting? Would she even survive it? She couldn't think about that. She had to believe it would work out. She had to. Finally, at 10 o'clock, the doors to the courtroom opened. Mai walked inside on legs that felt like jelly and took her seat at the table beside Kevin Park. Across the room, the lawyer for the foster care agency was already seated, a stack of files in front of him. The judge entered a few minutes later. Her name was Patricia Holloway, and Mai had looked her up online. She was in her 60s, with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had a reputation for being fair, but tough. She didn't let anyone get away with anything. Mai's heart was pounding so loud she was sure everyone could hear it. The proceedings began. The agency's lawyer went first, laying out the case for why Lily should remain in foster care. He talked about Mai's hospitalization. He talked about the conditions of the apartment when Lily was removed. He talked about risk factors and stability metrics and all sorts of clinical terms that made Mai feel like a specimen under a microscope. She wanted to scream. She wanted to stand up and tell them that she wasn't a case file. She was a mother. She had made mistakes, yes, terrible mistakes, but she had spent 3 years paying for them. She had clawed her way back from the edge of oblivion, but she stayed silent. Kevin had warned her that outbursts would only hurt her case. When it was Kevin's turn, he presented Mai's progress. The 18 months of stable employment. The apartment. The therapy records showing consistent attendance and improvement. The character references from her supervisor at the hospital and from Dr. Fong. Judge Holloway listened to all of it with an expression that gave nothing away. When Kevin finished, she shuffled through some papers and made a note. Then she said something that made Mai's breath catch in her throat. "I'd like to hear from the child." Lily had been waiting in a small room down the hall from the courtroom. A social worker named Mrs. Peterson sat with her, making small talk about school and the weather, trying to keep things light. But Lily could tell the woman was nervous too. Everyone was nervous today. Through the walls, Lily could hear muffled voices from the courtroom. She couldn't make out the words, but she knew they were talking about her mother, about what was going to happen to their family. She'd been through this before. Not a full custody hearing like this one, but smaller court dates, reviews, meetings where adults sat around a table and discussed her future like she wasn't even in the room. She'd learned to expect disappointment, to hope for the best but prepare for the worst. But today felt different. Today felt bigger. Her mother had been working so hard for so long. All those visits at the social services office, all those conversations where Mai promised things would be different. Lily wanted to believe it. She wanted to believe it more than anything. She just didn't know if she could. 3 years was a long time. 3 years of moving from home to home, of learning that nothing was permanent. She had built walls around her heart because it hurt too much to let people in. Even her mother, especially her mother, because what if Mai wasn't ready? What if the judge said yes, and Lily went home, and then something went wrong again? What if her mother got sick again, and Lily ended up back in the system, having to start over for the 5th time? She didn't think she could survive that. Better to stay guarded. Better to not get her hopes up too high. The door opened, and a court officer stepped in. "Lily, they're ready for you." Mrs. Peterson gave her an encouraging smile. "You'll do great, sweetheart. Just tell the truth." Lily nodded and stood up. Her legs felt wobbly, but she made herself walk forward. Her hand went to her jacket pocket, where she could feel the familiar shape of her recorder through the fabric. She always brought it with her to anything important. It made her feel less alone. The courtroom was bigger than she expected. There were rows of wooden benches like a church, mostly empty except for a few people she didn't recognize. At the front was a large desk where the judge sat, elevated above everyone else. American flags stood on either side, and there, at one of the tables, was her mother. Mai looked tired but put together. She was wearing a black dress that Lily had never seen before. Her hair was neat. Her hands were folded on the table in front of her, but Lily could see they were trembling. Their eyes met across the room, and for just a second, everything else disappeared. Lily saw her mother's lips form words, "I love you." Then the moment passed, and Lily was being led to a chair near the judge's bench. The chair was too big for her. Her feet dangled above the floor, and she felt very small and very young. The judge, an older woman with gray hair and glasses, looked down at her with an expression that Lily couldn't read. "Hello, Lily," the judge said. Her voice was formal but not unkind. "My name is Judge Holloway. Do you know why you're here today?" Lily nodded. "Yes, ma'am. It's about whether I can go back to live with my mom." "That's right." The judge glanced at some papers in front of her. "I've heard from a lot of adults today. Lawyers, social workers, doctors. They've all given me their opinions about what's best for you. But I wanted to hear from you directly. Is that okay?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good." The judge leaned back in her chair. "Let's start with something easy. Can you tell me about your current foster home? The Reyes family?" Lily thought carefully before answering. She knew that everything she said was being written down, analyzed, used to make decisions about her life. She had to be honest, but she also didn't want to say the wrong thing. "They're nice," she said. "Mr. and Mrs. Reyes take good care of me. I have my own room. They make sure I do my homework and eat dinner. Do you feel safe there?" "Yes." "Do you have friends at school?" Lily hesitated. That was a harder question. She had people she talked to at school, but she wouldn't really call them friends. It was hard to make real friends when you might be gone next month, when you'd already learned that getting attached just made it hurt more when you had to leave. A few, she said finally. I talked to some kids at lunch. The judge nodded slowly, making a note. And what about your mother? You've been having visits with her. Is that right? Yes, ma'am. Every 2 weeks. How do those visits go? Lily's chest tightened. This was dangerous territory. She didn't want to say anything that might hurt her mother's case. But she also couldn't lie. They're good, she said. We talk about stuff. She asks me about school and my foster home. Sometimes, we play card games. The lawyer for the foster care agency spoke up then. Your Honor, if I may. He was a tall man, with a thin mustache, and a voice that made Lily uncomfortable. He sounded like he was trying to be nice, but there was something cold underneath. Go ahead, the judge said. The lawyer stood up and walked toward Lily. Not too close, but close enough that she had to tilt her head back to look at him. Lily, he said, I want to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Can you do that? Lily nodded. When you lived with your mother before, things were difficult, weren't they? She wasn't able to take care of you the way she should have. Lily felt her face getting hot. She didn't like the way he said that. Like her mother was a bad person. Like it was all so simple. She was sick, Lily said quietly. The lawyer's expression didn't change. I understand. But the fact remains that you were removed from her care because the conditions in your home were unsafe. Your mother wasn't feeding you properly. She wasn't making sure you got to school. Is that correct? Lily's eyes stung. She didn't want to cry. Not here. Not in front of all these people. But the lawyer was making it sound so ugly, so one-sided. He didn't know what it was like. He didn't know that her mother had tried, had fought against the darkness every single day, and just hadn't been strong enough. She was sad, Lily said, her voice cracking. My dad died, and she got really, really sad. She couldn't help it. The lawyer paused, but his expression stayed neutral. I understand. That was a difficult time. But what I'm asking is whether you feel safe going back to live with her. How do you know the same thing won't happen again? Lily opened her mouth, but no words came out. That was the question. Wasn't it? The question that had been gnawing at her for 3 years. How could she know? How could anyone know? She felt tears starting to spill down her cheeks. She wiped at them with the back of her hand. Embarrassed. From across the room, she heard a small sound. Her mother had made a noise like a wounded animal, barely audible, and was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. Judge Holloway held up a hand. That's enough, counselor. She turned to Lily with a softer expression. Take your time. Sweetheart, there's no rush. Lily took a shaky breath. She thought about everything her mother had been through. The hospital stays, the years of work, the small apartment she'd rented, the job she'd kept, the therapy sessions and medication and all of it. Mai had done everything the court asked and more. But more than that, Lily thought about the visits. The way her mother looked at her, like she was the most precious thing in the world. The way Mai always asked about her day, really asked, like the answers mattered. The way she never made excuses for what happened, never tried to shift the blame, just said, I'm sorry, and I'm getting better, and I love you so much. I want to go home, Lily whispered. I want my mom. The courtroom went quiet. Even the lawyer stopped his pacing. Judge Holloway leaned forward. I hear you, Lily. But I need to make sure I'm doing what's best for you. Can you tell me more about why you want to go back? Help me understand. Lily wiped her face again. Her mind was racing, trying to find the right words. How could she explain something so big, so complicated? How could she make them understand what her mother meant to her? And then she thought of the recorder in her pocket, the simple wooden instrument that had been with her through 4 foster homes and 3 years of waiting. the lullaby that connected her to her mother even when they were apart. She looked up at the judge. "Can I show you something instead?" Judge Holloway raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Lily reached into her pocket and pulled out the recorder. The wood was worn smooth from years of handling. The tape, around the crack, near the mouthpiece, was peeling a little. "This was a present from my mom," Lily said. "She gave it to me when I was 5. She taught me a song on it. Can I play it for you?" The judge glanced at the lawyers, then back at Lily. There was a flicker of curiosity in her eyes, maybe even warmth. "If you'd like to," she said. "Go ahead." Lily brought the recorder to her lips. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. From something else. Something that felt almost like hope. She closed her eyes and began to play. The first note floated through the courtroom like a whisper. Soft and uncertain, the way a child takes their first step. But then the second note followed. And the third. And suddenly, the melody began to take shape. It was a simple tune. Nothing complicated. Nothing showy. Just a handful of notes arranged in a pattern that had been passed down through generations. A lullaby that mothers in China had sung to their children for 100 years or more. Lily played with her eyes closed. She didn't need to see the recorder or think about where to put her fingers. This song was part of her now, written into her bones. She had played it 1,000 times in the dark of night, in bedrooms that weren't really hers, in houses where she didn't belong. She had played it to remember, to hold on, to survive. The courtroom, which had been filled with tension and legal arguments just moments before, went completely still. The lawyers stopped shuffling their papers. The court reporter's fingers paused above her keys. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to dim, as if making room for something more important. Mai Chen sat frozen at the defense table. Her hands were pressed flat against the wood, and tears were streaming silently down her face. She recognized the melody from the very first note. How could she not? She had taught it to Lily herself, all those years ago, when their family was whole and the future seemed bright. She remembered that night so clearly. Lily's 5th birthday. They couldn't afford much of a party, just a small cake from the grocery store and a few balloons. But Lily had been so happy, bouncing around their little apartment with excitement. The recorder had been a last-minute gift. Mai found it at a thrift store, tucked in a bin with other forgotten instruments. It only cost $2, but she had cleaned it carefully and wrapped it in newspaper decorated with hand-drawn stars. Lily had unwrapped it with wide eyes, turning it over in her small hands like it was made of gold. "What is it?" "Mama, it's a recorder," Mai had said, kneeling beside her. "You blow into it to make music. Here, let me show you." She had taken the instrument and played a few notes of the lullaby. The same lullaby her own mother had sung to her in their village in China, before Mai moved to America, before everything changed. The melody was older than anyone could remember, passed from mother to daughter like a precious heirloom. Lily had listened, with her mouth open in wonder. "Teach me, Mama." So Mai had. She sat with Lily for hours that night, patiently showing her where to put her fingers, how to blow gently, how to move from one note to the next. By the time Lily's bedtime came around, she could play the whole song, only a little wobbly. From then on, it became their ritual. Every night, Lily would play the lullaby, and Mai would hum along, or sing the words in Mandarin. Her husband would stand in the doorway and watch them, his face soft with love. Those were the happiest days of Mai's life. She hadn't known it then, hadn't appreciated how precious they were. She had thought they would go on forever, and then they didn't. After her husband died, Mai lost herself completely. The grief swallowed her whole, pulled her down into a darkness so deep she couldn't see any light. She stopped being able to function, stopped being able to care for her daughter, stopped being able to do anything except lie in bed and wish she could disappear. During those terrible months, when the apartment was falling apart and Mai couldn't even muster the energy to feed her child, Lily still played the lullaby every night. Mai would hear it through the fog of her depression, floating in from the living room where her daughter sat alone. The music was a lifeline, a thread connecting them even as everything else fell apart. But Mai had been too sick to grab onto it, too lost in her own pain, to see what her daughter was trying to tell her. "I'm still here, Mama. I still love you. Please come back to me." Now, sitting in this courtroom 6 years later, Mai finally understood. She understood that Lily had been fighting for their family long before Mai found the strength to fight for herself. This small, quiet girl had kept their connection alive through music when everything else had failed. The lullaby continued, note by gentle note. Lily's playing was steady now, confident. The melody rose and fell like breathing, like the rhythm of a heart. Judge Holloway watched with an unreadable expression, but her eyes had softened. She had been on the bench for over 20 years. She had seen hundreds of custody cases, hundreds of broken families, hundreds of children caught in the middle of adult problems. She had learned to keep her emotions in check, to make decisions based on evidence and law rather than sentiment. But this was different. This wasn't just a child reciting rehearsed answers. This was something real, something raw and honest in a way that courtrooms rarely saw. The lawyer for the foster care agency looked uncomfortable. He shuffled his papers and glanced at his watch, clearly unsure what to do. This wasn't in his playbook. You couldn't cross-examine a lullaby. Kevin Park, Mai's public defender, sat perfectly still. He was young enough to still be surprised by moments like this. Moments when the rigid machinery of the legal system made room for something human. Mrs. Peterson, the social worker who had accompanied Lily, was quietly crying. She had worked with this girl for months, had seen how closed off and guarded she was. She had never seen Lily open up like this. And in the back of the courtroom, near the doors, someone else had slipped in during the testimony. Mrs. Reyes, Lily's foster mother. She hadn't planned to come, hadn't thought it was her place. But something had told her she should be here, should see this moment. Now she stood against the wall, her hand pressed to her chest. Watching the child she had cared for these past months reveal a depth of feeling she had never shown at home. The lullaby reached its final phrase. Lily played the last few notes slowly, drawing them out, not wanting the song to end. Because as long as she was playing, she didn't have to speak. She didn't have to find words for things that were too big for words. But eventually, the final note faded into silence. Lily lowered the recorder and opened her eyes. She was trembling, not from cold or fear, but from the release of something she had been carrying for a very long time. She looked directly at Judge Holloway. "My mom taught me this before she got sick," she said. Her voice was small but steady. She said music is how we remember people we love, even when they're far away. I played it every night in all my foster homes. Every single night. So I wouldn't forget her. So she'd know I was still waiting. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice cracked with emotion. "I know she made mistakes. I know things got really bad. But she's different now. I can see it in her eyes when she visits me. She's trying so hard. She's been trying for 3 years." Lily turned to look at her mother across the courtroom. Mai was openly sobbing now, not even trying to hide it. "I'm not scared to go home with her," Lily said, turning back to the judge. "I'm scared of what happens if I can't. Because she's my mom. She's my family. And I don't want to spend the rest of my life in places where I don't belong, playing this song by myself in the dark." The courtroom was absolutely silent. Even the clock on the wall seemed to stop ticking. Judge Holloway removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes. When she put them back on, there was something different in her expression. Something that looked almost like resolve. "Thank you, Lily," she said quietly. She turned to the lawyers. "I'm going to call a brief recess. I need time to review the evidence in light of this testimony. We'll reconvene in 20 minutes." The bailiff called all rise as the judge left the bench. People began to move around, stretching, whispering to each other. But Mai Chen didn't move. She sat at the defense table with tears still running down her face, staring at her daughter across the room, and Lily stared back, clutching the wooden recorder that had kept them connected through 3 years of darkness. For the first time in as long as either of them could remember, they both felt something they had been afraid to feel. Hope. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. Mai sat in the courtroom during the recess, unable to move, unable to think about anything, except what the judge might decide. Kevin Park tried to reassure her, telling her that Lily's testimony was powerful, that he had a good feeling about this. But Mai had learned not to trust good feelings. She had been disappointed too many times. Lily was taken back to the waiting room with Mrs. Peterson. Before she left, she looked over her shoulder at her mother and gave her a small wave. Mai waved back, trying to smile even though her face felt numb. The foster care agency's lawyer spent the recess making phone calls in the hallway. Through the glass doors, Mai could see him pacing back and forth, his expression tight. He didn't look as confident as he had at the start of the hearing. Finally, the bailiff announced that court was back in session. Everyone stood as Judge Holloway returned to the bench. She moved slowly, carefully, like someone carrying a heavy weight. She sat down and arranged her papers in front of her. For a long moment, she didn't speak. The silence in the courtroom was so thick, you could feel it pressing against your skin. Then she looked up. "I've been doing this job for a long time," she began. Her voice was different than before, less formal, more personal. "I've presided over more custody cases than I can count. I've seen parents who make promises they can't keep. I've seen children shuffled from home to home because the adults in their lives failed them. I've learned to be skeptical of emotional appeals and to focus on the facts." She paused, adjusting her glasses. "The facts in this case are complicated. Miss Chen, you experienced a severe mental health crisis that resulted in your daughter being removed from your care. The conditions in your home at that time were not safe. That is documented. That is not in dispute." Mai's heart sank. She knew the judge was just stating the record, but hearing it out loud, in this official space, made her feel like the worst person in the world. However, Judge Holloway continued, the facts also show something else. They show a woman who has spent 3 years doing everything in her power to rebuild her life. You have maintained stable employment for 18 months. You have attended every required therapy session. Your mental health providers report significant and sustained improvement. You have secured appropriate housing. You have never missed a single scheduled visit with your daughter. The judge looked directly at Mai now. "Miss Chen, I don't know if you understand how rare that is. Most parents in your situation give up. They get overwhelmed by the requirements. Or they relapse. Or they simply disappear from their children's lives. You didn't do any of those things. You fought." Mai felt tears welling up again, but she blinked them back. She couldn't fall apart now. Not yet. Judge Holloway turned her attention to the room at large. "But what really struck me today was not the paperwork or the testimony from doctors and social workers. It was what I saw when that little girl played her recorder." She leaned forward, her expression intense. "I've been doing this long enough to know when a child is telling me what they think I want to hear, and when they're telling me the truth. What Lily showed me today was the truth. That child has been holding on to her mother through 3 years of uncertainty, keeping their bond alive with a simple melody. That kind of connection doesn't happen by accident. It speaks to something real, something worth protecting." The foster care agency's lawyer shifted in his seat. "Your Honor, with respect, emotional attachment alone isn't sufficient grounds for reunification. The agency's concern is whether Miss Chen can provide a stable, safe environment going forward. The risk of relapse." Judge Holloway held up a hand. "I'm aware of the concerns, Counselor. I've read every page of your file. But here's what I've observed in 20 years on this bench. There is no such thing as zero risk. Every decision I make involves uncertainty. The question isn't whether there's a chance things could go wrong. The question is whether the potential benefits outweigh the potential harms. She picked up a piece of paper from her desk. I have here a letter from Miss Chen's therapist, Dr. Linda Fong. Dr. Fong has been treating Miss Chen for over 2 years. In her professional opinion, Miss Chen has developed strong coping mechanisms, maintains good insight into her condition, and has demonstrated a sustained commitment to her mental health. Dr. Fong specifically states that she believes Miss Chen is ready and able to care for her daughter. The judge set the paper down. I also have reports from Miss Chen's employer describing her as reliable, hardworking, and dedicated. I have records showing she has never missed a payment on her apartment. I have documentation of every single visit she has made to see her daughter, arriving early and staying until the last possible moment. She took off her glasses and looked at Mai with something that might have been respect. Miss Chen, you made terrible mistakes. You let your grief consume you to the point where your child was put at risk. That is something you will have to live with for the rest of your life. But I also believe that people can change. I believe that the woman sitting in front of me today is not the same woman who lost custody 3 years ago. And I believe that your daughter knows this better than anyone. Mai was shaking now, tears streaming freely down her face. She didn't try to stop them. Judge Holloway turned to the bailiff. Please bring the child back in. The courtroom went very quiet as they waited. Then the doors opened, and Lily walked in, Mrs. Peterson guiding her gently with a hand on her shoulder. Lily's eyes went straight to her mother, searching Mai's face for clues. Mai couldn't speak. She could only look at her daughter with everything she was feeling written plainly on her face. Judge Holloway waited until Lily was standing near the front of the room, then spoke directly to her. Lily, I want you to understand something. What I'm about to say is not a guarantee that everything will be perfect from now on. Life doesn't work that way. There will be hard days ahead. There will be challenges. Your mother is still going to have to work at staying healthy, and you are both going to have to learn how to be a family again, after a long time apart. Lily nodded, her small hands clutching the recorder so tightly her knuckles were white. But, the judge continued, her voice softening, I also believe that you and your mother have something special. Something worth giving a chance. I've seen a lot of families come through this courtroom, and very few of them have shown me the kind of bond you two share. She picked up her pen. It is the ruling of this court that Lily Chen be returned to the custody of her mother, Mai Chen, effective immediately. This reunification will be subject to regular check-ins with social services for the first 6 months, after which we will review the situation. But as of today, you are going home. For one frozen second, nothing happened. The words hung in the air, like something too fragile to touch. Then Lily let out a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh, and ran across the courtroom. Mai met her halfway, falling to her knees and wrapping her arms around her daughter so tightly that neither of them could breathe. They held each other and cried, 3 years of separation and fear and loneliness pouring out of them in a flood. Around them, the courtroom came alive. Kevin Park was grinning, shaking hands with someone from the social services office. Mrs. Peterson was wiping her eyes with a tissue. Even the stenographer had stopped typing to watch. In the back of the room, Mrs. Reyes stood quietly, watching the reunion. She felt a strange mix of emotions. She was happy for Lily, genuinely happy, but she was also a little sad. She had cared for this girl for months, had tried her best to give her a stable home. She slipped out the door without saying goodbye. It didn't feel like her place to interrupt. At the front of the courtroom, Judge Holloway gathered her papers. She had more cases to hear, more families to sort through, more difficult decisions to make. But before she left, she allowed herself one moment to watch the mother and daughter holding on to each other like they would never let go. This was why she did this job. Not for the paperwork or the legal arguments. For moments like this, when the system actually worked, when a family that had been broken found its way back together. Mai pulled back just far enough to look at Lily's face. She cupped her daughter's cheeks in her hands, tears still running down her own face. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry for everything. Lily shook her head. It's okay, Mama. You came back. That's all that matters. Mai pulled her close again. I will never leave you again, she said fiercely. Never. I promise. And there, in the middle of a courtroom that had seen so much pain and disappointment, Lily believed her. Not because the promise was easy, but because she had watched her mother fight for 3 years to be able to make it. That was worth believing in. Later that day, Mai and Lily walked out of the courthouse together. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. They stood on the steps for a moment, just breathing, just being together. Can we go home now? Lily asked. Mai smiled, the first real smile in what felt like forever. Yes, baby. Let's go home. They walked to the bus stop hand in hand. On the ride across the city, Lily rested her head against her mother's shoulder, exhausted but happy. The recorder was still in her pocket, safe and sound. That night, in the little one-bedroom apartment with the fold-out couch and the stuffed panda, Mai made dinner for the first time in 3 years for her daughter. Just simple noodles with vegetables, nothing fancy. But they ate together at the small table by the window, talking about everything and nothing. When it got late, Lily pulled out her recorder. Can I play it for you? She asked. Like we used to? Mai's eyes filled with tears. She nodded. Lily lifted the instrument to her lips and began to play. The same lullaby, the same simple melody. But this time, she wasn't playing it alone in the dark, hoping her mother would somehow hear. This time, Mai was right there beside her. And as the music filled the small apartment, Mai began to hum along, then sing, her voice rough and unpracticed, but full of love. The lullaby floated out the window and into the night, carrying with it 3 years of pain, 3 years of hope, and the promise of a new beginning. They were finally home.